Yeah, I think VJ Edgecombe at number three. I think that there was obviously some expectation that Ace Bailey would be the one that would be at number three, but because of all the controversy with him skipping pre-draft workouts and all that, he dropped down to number five. I think that with VJ, there's going to be some time for him to develop, but even though the Sixers aren't a very precarious spot, there's also a pathway for them to really get back on top again.
Welcome to the Sportsnaut interview, and joining us today is our go-to guy for all things NBA. Mark Medina is joining us, and we're here today to break down and recap round one of the NBA draft. We're going to get all of Mark's thoughts here in just a minute, but Mark, thank you so much for making a few minutes for us today.
Evan, thanks so much for having me today. It's always fun.
Yeah, let's first start with the first overall pick in the draft, Cooper Flagg. It came as no surprise. Everyone knew he was going to be the pick once the Mavericks won the lottery. Now, I see some of the pundits out there saying that he could be one of the most impactful draft picks that we've seen in the last couple decades. I just want to get some of your thoughts on Cooper Flagg. I mean, we all know the ceiling is super high with this kid. He's very young. He's only 18 years old. But as far as the impact that you think he could make early on in his career, I'm talking year one, year two, maybe year three, what could we expect to see from him?
I think he's going to win Rookie of the Year. I share the same sentiment with one executive that I talked to before the draft that predicts that Cooper Flagg is going to be a player that's a multi-year All-Star, multi-year All-NBA first-team player. I don't know how many championships he's going to win because that's really going to depend on what happens with the Mavericks and if there's another team he plays on. But I think from a skill set standpoint, he's going to be one of the most impactful number one picks of all time. And
Oh,
some of his skills are different when you think of number one picks that have a defined skill set. Think of Magic Johnson, the power, Shaquille O'Neal or Magic Johnson with the passing, Shaquille O'Neal with the power, LeBron James with this worldly athleticism. The thing with Cooper Flagg is he's just really great at everything, but he's not this player that is a jack of all trades, master of none. He's very good at defending multiple positions. He's a great playmaker, great scorer, has a lot of athleticism, has great work ethic. So I think in the short and long term, the good thing about him is that he's considered someone who's very adaptable. And when you
mhm.
look at how that pertains to Dallas, it can cut both ways. Unlike some other number one picks that are on a rebuilding team, this Mavericks team isn't considered a rebuilding team. This could be a playoff team. But he's also going to have to be adaptable because he could be someone that has a predominant role for however long Kyrie Irving's out, or if Anthony Davis has injuries next season, or he could be the third option if both of those players are healthy. But because of his skill set and his attitude, there's a strong feeling around the NBA that he can adapt to all those different things.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about landing spots, you mentioned that he couldn't have been a better fit getting to a team with some stars like Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, who I know is hurt right now, but they've got a few other great players around him as well. So he should flourish right away. I'm excited to see how he does early in his career. Now, when you look at the draft class overall, we know it's very, very good at the top with Cooper Flagg, as we just discussed. But when we look back on this draft class in 5 or 6 years, what do you think people will be saying about the talent and the depth in the class overall?
Yeah, I think the class is considered strong, but it's not like elite. It's not going to harken reminders back to 1996 when there was just a boatload of Hall of Famers.
Mhm.
I think when you're looking at this draft, it's mostly about Cooper Flagg and to a lesser extent Dylan Harper. There wasn't any sort of debate. Do you go with Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper? That was pretty clear cut that Cooper Flagg was going to be number one, Dylan Harper likely number two. The only scenario that wouldn't happen is if the Spurs made a blockbuster trade. They
Right.
decide against that partly because Dylan Harper's got a great work ethic. He has a great shot. He has a lot of great upside. He comes from an international background from the Philippines. That kind of fits the Spurs culture with trying to have international type players. But I think the rest of the class, they're not bad players. It's just it's really hard to project, what the long term trajectory is, and it's likely that a lot of these players are going to be solid rotational players, role players, but not expected to be, perennial all stars compared to what the expectations are for Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper.
Yeah, you brought up Dylan Harper. You got to love what the Spurs are building there. Of course, the centerpiece being Wembanyama. They bring in Castle last year in the draft, who won Rookie of the Year. They made a trade for De'Aaron Fox, and now they add Dylan Harper. There's a lot of good talent there, a lot of young talent there. So you expect the Spurs to probably won't be picking in the top 10 next year or the year after that, but they're building something very good there in San Antonio. I'm sure you've had a chance now to really kind of digest round one and take a look at the whole thing. Who's your big winner? Who walked away from the night as really improving their team?
Well, not to be obvious, but I think it really comes down to Dallas and San Antonio not
Yeah.
screwing it up. With Dallas, they have a chance to get out of jail free card
Yeah.
ever since the Luka Doncic trade, where they find a player that, at very worst, is a really great win now player that has a lot of good skills and has a
Mhm.
great attitude, but at best could be that franchise cornerstone that mitigates a lot of frustrations. With Luka Doncic's departure. I think with the Spurs, when you're looking at this team, they're a playoff team, assuming obviously there's no issues with health. They have a perfect blend of elite youth, but they also have some proven veteran talent, most notably with De'Aaron Fox. And so when you're looking at how they are offensively, it just seems so dynamic. So many different combinations. The pick and roll game with Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox, the ability for Dylan Harper and Stefan Castle to play on the wings as well as share ball handling duty with Fox. Victor Wembanyama being a stretch five in a big man's body. There's a lot of versatile options with him spraying the floor and have a great outside shot. So those are the obvious winners. I think, there's just a lot of losers when it comes to this draft as well, as far as some trades trying to get my head wrapped around, as well as just how this whole situation played out with Ace Bailey.
Yeah, let's talk about some. Let's jump into it with some of those losers. I keep reading about the Pelicans and some of the head scratching moves that they made. The trade for Derek Queen. Talk to us a little bit. Give us some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what the logic is, what the Pelicans are doing. They made some front office changes because there has been a lot of frustrations with underachieving performances, obviously injuries. So they replaced David Griffin, have Mars. He has a lot of experience, but their strategy in draft night seemed to really cut both ways. They trade up to number 13 after drafting Jeremiah Fears at number 7. They get Derek Queen, but at the same time they trade CJ McCollum to get Jordan Poole. You would think that they're either going to go into let's start going into tank mode and rebuild, or go all in. And it feels like they took half measured approaches on both. Trading CJ McCollum, you understand. He's a veteran player, but he has some injuries. What's the upside beyond having a positive locker room presence? But Jordan Poole, he's not someone that's really going to move the needle. He's a great scorer. He's improved his attitude, but he's not a player that's going to really put you to the next top as far as winning, but he's also not bad enough where all of a sudden you're improving your lottery odds. And then to give up your draft assets just to move up higher in the draft doesn't make any sense. So I'm really befuddled with what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, well, you're not alone in those thoughts. It seems to be the common thought out there, based on what I was reading, and I tend to share the same thought process as well. Now, we often hear when you talk about a young player being drafted to an organization, whether it's basketball or football or any professional sport, we often talk about fits within the organization and the system. So when you look at the round one and these prospects and where some of these guys landed beyond Cooper Flagg, because we both agree that landing spot for him was ideal. Is there someone else that you think really landed in a very good spot?
Yeah, I think VJ Edgecombe at number three. I think that there was obviously some expectation that Ace Bailey would be the one that would be
Yeah.
at number three, but because of all the controversy with him skipping pre-draft workouts and all that, he dropped down to number five. I think that with VJ, there's going to be some time for him to develop, but even though the Sixers aren't a very precarious spot, there's also a pathway for them to really get back on top again because Joel Embiid is going to be healthier next season. Same thing with Paul George. When you look at VJ's game, it's very well balanced. He's shown a lot of upside in development, and his development sources come from a lot of places. It's not just playing at Baylor. He's also played for the Jamaican team, or
Yeah.
I mean, the Bahamian national team,
Yeah.
and he is seen as someone that is a really great two-way player, has a great attitude, very coachable. And I think because he's not having this sort of pressure to be a number one guy, it's going to be okay that he has time to develop and grow into his game a little bit because that's what his whole MO has been about during his whole career. That it's taken time for him to develop, but the more and more opportunity he's gotten, he's become a very well-rounded player.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit more into that Ace Bailey controversy that you mentioned briefly there with him um, denying pre-draft visits and whatnot, and he had his preferred destinations, and I'm sure all prospects do. Again, in all professional sports, I mean, you've seen in the NFL with Eli Manning, refusing to play for a certain team, and I know that type of thing goes on, but it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like based on some of the and I didn't see the whole draft, but some of the social media clips that I saw out there, I saw more than one prospect almost seeming like unhappy, visibly unhappy about, where he was going. I believe there was a player who was drafted by the Raptors, just kind of visibly upset and almost like verbally saying some things that you could see on camera about where he was selected. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just has to do with the era that we're in, where everything's
Yeah.
documented.
Hmm.
There's always been behind the scenes maneuvering with players trying to predetermine where they're going to be. I think the most notable example comes in 1996 with Kobe Bryant.
Hmm.
It wasn't just Jerry West's brilliance and talent evaluation with trading Valia Divac to the Hornets to get the draft rights. There was also a lot of behind the scenes maneuvering that Kobe and Arn Tellem did with sending messages out that if he were to get drafted, he would go overseas. So that part
Yeah.
isn't new. I think what is new is that I don't think players are as sophisticated, partly because there's just more exposure
Right.
in masking some of this maneuvering. Like, let your agents do the work. And so, with Ace Bailey specifically, at first, I didn't really make much of the fact that he was dodging certain pre-draft workouts, but when you're doing multiple ones of that, that's when it raises a red flag. And with the Utah Jazz, we've seen Danny Ainge. He doesn't care about whether a player wants to be there or not. He is going to, pick who he thinks is the best player available. And it's now on Ace Bailey to make the best of it. And if he doesn't want to make the best
Yeah.
of it, Danny Ainge will gladly ship him somewhere maybe that he doesn't even want to be as well for more assets. And so I think what players need to be prepared for, with their representation as well as their own selves, is that you know the draft, the teams are in control, and whether you get your wish list or not, it is obviously a blessing to be drafted because it's
Yeah.
you're joining very rarefied air to be a part of an elite lottery pick as well as just a draft class, etc. I mean, there's literally only 60 players every year that are drafted into the NBA. So I think with that, they need to just be more awareness
Yeah.
of the signals you're sending your team, your both your future teammates, veteran players in the locker room, as well as organizations on how you're going to embrace opportunities that you're looking forward to or not.
Yeah, and then on the flip side of that, I believe it was Edgecombe who was selected, and you heard him talk in his interview after he was drafted about how his the struggle that his family endured, having to live off a generator and whatnot. So he seemed extremely grateful to have the opportunity. So, anyways, I just want to get your thoughts on that. The final thing I wanted to ask you about is you look at the prospects in round one. A lot of young kids, of course, 18, 19-year-olds in many of the cases. And I know that when the scouts and the executives are researching these players and scouting them, they're often thinking long term and upside and what they could develop into, possibly 5 years down the road. Is there a particular player who was drafted in round one that you think is extremely raw right now, but in 5 or 6 years you think they could develop into a rotational player, or an even longer term have a long successful NBA career?
Yeah, it's really hard, and it's not just because I'm by no means as strong as an expert as the other teams that are, having scouts watch these prospects on a day in and day out basis, but even they struggle to really know what any player's long-term trajectory outside of the lottery is because
Yeah,
there's just so many different combinations. You've seen, mid to late first round picks, the average year or lifespan of an NBA career is usually like 3, 4 years. But then occasionally you do find those rare gems like a Tony Parker that was selected at 28th, but it's really a crapshoot. And so with that, I know he's a lottery pick, but because he is still a developmental project, I'm going to go with VJ Edgecombe because, again, he is not a plug and play player right now, but he has an all around skill set, a great work ethic, great attitude, as well as not as much pressure that suggests that, he might not be an elite player, perennial all star as we're projecting Cooper Flagg can be, but I think that he has the right ingredients to have a sustained and prolonged NBA career. And look, when you're talking, especially lottery guys, they're envisioning all-star appearances, championships, etc. But again, when you're keeping in perspective that the average lifespan for any player that's drafted is, 3 to 5 years, even having a long-term, career 10 years as a rotation player is a success story. So I would put that on him. And that has more to do with just it's really, really difficult even to project anything for guys outside of the lottery.
Yeah, and Edgecombe, as I mentioned, certainly a player we could all cheer for as well. So he's our guy, Mark Medina, all things NBA. We always lean on him for his insight. And Mark, once again, we thank you so much for all your time and your great knowledge of the game. Thank you very much today.
I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to free agency. It's coming right around the corner.
That's right. It never stops. It just keeps going and going. Maybe we'll probably have to get you on for that as well. So be ready.
Sounds good. I'll be ready. I'll be ready.